Grange Hill happened because I wanted to create a contemporary school story. We had previously done stories set in public schools and private schools, Billy Bunter and Jennings and things like that, but we hadn't ever done a realistic series set in a contemporary school, and that's what I wanted to do. And I talked to various writers about the possibility of doing something like that. And then one day Phil Redmond came to see me, and in those days Phil was known as a comedy writer, not as anything else, and he wanted to write kids sitcoms, and I said no, I wasn't interested at that moment in kids sitcoms, but what I really wanted was a series set in a school, preferably a secondary modern. And he said, oh gosh, you know, that's something that really interests me, because that I went to one and blah 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 blah. And so I said, well, you know, go and have a go, which he did, and that's how it started. I mean, it was originally 6 episodes. We never thought about it going any further than that. We never thought that it would grow into what it grew into. That wasn't the idea in the first place at all. We'd never done a long-running series of that nature on children's television. When Grange Hill was cast, originally I was involved very closely both with the scripts and with the casting and with the general feel of the series, because we were aware that what we were doing was very different and very new, and that we were going into areas that people hadn't been into before. So I was involved more closely with it in the early days than I was to be later on. Grange Hill obviously attracted a lot of criticism from a lot of different people. It attracted criticism from teachers. They perceived it as undermining their authority. In one of the early stories, the kids went on strike and stood on the tables in the dining hall and shouted, and teachers didn't like that. And we got criticism from politicians. There was a story about shoplifting, and they said that we were encouraging children to be thieves because we showed more or less how you did it. So there was a lot of criticism. There was criticism within the BBC. I mean, there were people in the BBC who didn't think we should be doing something as edgy as this for kids. And I have a feeling, I can't remember this entirely, but I have a feeling that there were questions asked in Parliament and things. So what did I feel about it? I quite enjoyed it, really. My only concern was that we would get taken off the air. We weren't. And again, Monica Sims, who was the head of children's in those days, was fantastic and stood by it and defended it. And you know, it ended up by being a sort of pillar of the children's schedule. I did spend time on the set of Grange Hill, again in the early days, because it was very important that we all got the tone and feel of the piece right. And I used to go into the studio. I mean, I was executive producer of a lot of drama, and I would always visit the set at least once, and probably more often during a production. So it depended on who was doing it and what the scale of the production was as to how much I would be involved, and latterly it probably became less. But no, I was with Grange Hill. I did certainly go out on the set on a number of occasions. And of course then there was a period when Grange Hill was actually done in, the interiors were done in Television Centre. Originally it was done in an old school, but it was done in Television Centre, and that caused an awful lot of ruptions because there were hordes and hordes of kids screaming round Television Centre, and people didn't like that much either, so that soon moved out of Television Centre. There were times, I think, when one saw scripts that either the storyline was not entirely appropriate or it was being approached from the wrong angle, and then one would interfere. But as I recall, not that often. The thing that we did probably control more than anything else was language. Language offends people, and more than anything, and certainly it offended people then, which was in a less risk-averse world. But language, the fact that kids use four-letter words all the time in the playground, and did then, adults didn't seem to comprehend. And so flipping neck was the worst it ever got.